Arturo. Yeah. Yeah. So I'm here to illuminate you on mixed method research, a concept which I didn't know when I began as a young researcher who graduated in econometrics and who did a PhD on the effects of environmental policy instruments on technical change. And this was late 80s, before transition studies existed. And yeah, together with some other people, I was one of the early transition researchers. And I'm really happy that, that we were able to establish a new field of research, which is multidisciplinary and engages with issues of, transitions to sustainability in sectors and economies. Well, as a researcher, I became a critical methodological pluralist, which I can see the value of every method and a theoretical perspective, but also the limitations. And yeah, I feel that multidisciplinary research is research which helps to obtain a deeper understanding of the phenomenon that you're studying by paying attention to issues of complexity, uncertainty, and normativity. And one of the quotes that I really like, and which is very true, is at the bottom of this slide, and it says, "A scientist would rather use someone else's toothbrush than another scientist's terminology." And this is so true on method. So people are wedded to particular theories and methods. And I think most of you are a PhD researcher, and you should be aware that the method and theory that you use during your PhD is going to be a lifelong influence, and it's difficult to escape the influence of that. With that, I'll start my presentation with a question. I think a good way to introduce this the topic of multi-method research is by examining a question and possible ways of answering that question. So the question that I have here is, why do women receive lower work payments than men in the same jobs? Now, there are different explanations for that. And the first explanation is that they are working in sectors where payments are lower. A second explanation is that, men psychologically, without perhaps knowing it, so unconsciously, prefer men for higher position. A third possible explanation says that women tend to be salary takers instead of negotiators. And it might also be the case that they are perceived to be less devoted to work because they also have parental duties. I think there is, these are just a few questions or explanations for this phenomenon. There might be others as well. Now, how to research this? Well, there are really different ways of researching this. And the use of direct questions is also I think, a very valid approach to use. So you could ask people if they are a salary taker or negotiator, and you may have to explain those words, but I think this is definitely possible. You can also discuss it in a focus group, which allows for an exchange. If you're more, let's say, if you're into econometrics, you can examine covariation. So you have a database and you examine the covariations between to see which factors, that's the word that's often used, sort of are associated with particular outcomes, the dependent variable. A more, let's say, someone who's more into critical theory might think of finding useful concepts such as subconscious or patriarchy and include that in the analysis. You may also partition women into causal groups, for instance, those that are careerists or career-oriented versus others, and those that work part-time or full-time. The role of context can be examined to see whether there are differences, and also in terms of the relevant factors and mechanisms. And what you can also do, and I think this is always advisable, is to look at available studies. What other researchers have found out about this topic. So all these methods have limitations, and if you are not aware of those limitations, then your explanation is likely to be poor or one-sided. And I will try to argue and explain to you why mixed method could help avoid one-sided and superficial sort of explanations. And as a researcher, I know that who supervise many PhD students, I know that often researchers limit themselves to the academic literature. I don't think that's a good idea. I tell my PhD students and master students always to look at journalistic contributions to see what journalists have written about this topic. And the reason for doing that is that journalists pay attention to real actors and to real events and organizations, and they bring out the drama that's often hidden in academic publications. Well, by paying attention to those aspects, I think you're able also to, I think you're well prepared or better prepared for social science research and able to do it in a different way. Now, I consider myself an innovation and transition researcher. I think you aspire to become one. And I think it's good to also say something about the ontology of transition researchers, which is that it sees people and organizations as part and parcel of processes of reproduction and transformation. And well, that's a bit of a simple distinction. And they also, which are different across the world. So there is also a place paid attention to the research that's been done. The second important thing, ontological element, is that, or assumption, is that it sees practices of doing and thinking as conditioned, but not fully determined by the organizational norms and logics, which are internalized, also influenced by experiences, life experiences, and educational experiences, and what you've studied, the practices that people are capable of, and the valuations of the actions that are being considered. I'll come back to those issues sort of later in my presentations. I also have found out that people apply different schemes of evaluation in different times and context. And these schemes of evaluations are not always clear, not even to the people who apply them. So an outsider may be able to capture those, but an outsider may also hold very theoretical and one-sided views on those schemes of evaluation by considering people as well, rational or really conditioned and socialized. And the last thing about transition research, which I think is really foundational to the field, is that the past, future, and present are interlinked. They're always related. So the present depends on the past, the build-up and the experiences and all the entanglements that have been formed. But there's also always the future, to which people orient themselves. People as reflective beings orient themselves to the future because they have certain views about the future. I mean, they either want to, they have ideas about better futures. They also may pay attention to dangers and opportunities. So that's just about transition research. Well, in the philosophy of science, it says, well, there's two research traditions. Actually, it's much more, but I think these are typically sort of mentioned and pulled out. The first one is positivism, based on objective measurement, often used to investigate statistical correlations. And the second one is humanistic. It's interpretivism, aimed at understanding people's ways of thinking. And the interpretivists pay special attention to belief, emotions, and experiences. And the positivists put great value on measurement and theory. That's the philosophical take on this. I think most research, pays attention to many things which are not mentioned here: institutions, systems, and so I think what we've seen is a shift from grand theory to middle range theory, more attention to interaction effects. Now, transition research, as you will know, will study social technical systems which are something that is being called a niche or a regime, with special attention to dynamics in the interaction of those systems and configurations with policy choices and societal calls for change. Well, not sure. Well, here's a paper that I published in a biology journal in a special issue on evolution and sustainability, which argues that actors are myopically caught in processes of co-evolution. And I think that's a view which I think a lot of people would adhere to, but it has not been sufficiently spelled out. I won't be presenting this further. Now, transition research, as you probably know, is interested in patterns, in stability and change, which occurs in patterns, is interested in mechanisms behind those patterns, and the mechanisms usually involve interaction effects. So I find that very exciting and something worthwhile to investigate. So I'm happy to be in this field. Attention is being paid to the duality of agency and structure without using those terms. But the view really is that actors are embedded in organizations and, strategic action fields and broader context. Now, according to Frank Gils, which I think you all know, in a recent article about what is this? Causality and explanation in social technical transitions research. Says that complex causalities are essential for explaining social technical transitions. And he also, draws attention to the need for, a middle range framework and making use of a toolbox of causal explanations. Causal mechanisms for causal explanation. And in this article, he says, well, transition research, when it was young, it was criticized for sufficiently paying attention to the politics and power of behind stability, but also change, to geography, cultural meanings, and also the behavior as practices, and business strategies. I think those were valid criticism, which also have been taken up by transition researchers, because I think the field is quite is open to criticism and has responded to those. In recent years, there have been also epistemological criticisms, especially by people who hold up the philosophy of science position of critical realism. And it says, well, you talk about structures, but it's often not clear what these structures are, what they're doing. And you talk about mechanisms, but how can these mechanisms be established? Because they're not directly visible. I think that I've read those articles by Steve Sorrell and others, and I think there was fair criticism in this. And in response to that criticism, Frank Geels, who's really one of the big guys in our field, said that or argued that transition research should should use methods which have not been used so much. And he gave a few examples. He also argued for mixed method research, on which I will have a number of slides. He mentioned qualitative comparative analysis, on which I also have a slide, which is for medium N, so not small n or big N type of research, but which allows you to establish the effects of interaction effects. And he mentioned event sequence analysis, which is well known, of which Abbott is one of the big scholars. Now, about mixed method research. Well, there's a really good article on this. It's by Johnson and Onwubusi, not sure how to pronounce that. And it's called Mixed Methods Research Paradigm, whose time has come. And it's really an insightful article, and I have a few slides about it, and I also suggest to read it. What they say is that, or how they present it, is as the third research paradigm that bridges the schism between quantitative and qualitative research. They call it an expansive and creative form of research instead of a limiting form of research. And often, but not always, a distinction is made between mixed method research, which is based in two different paradigms, and multi-method research, which is then being done within the same paradigm, positivism or interpretism or something else. Well, just to make it a little bit more concrete, what would be examples of mixed method research? Well, an example is that if you do, is to do a statistical analysis of a corpus text, which can be a database of patents or newspapers, in combination with a careful reading of the of a number of texts. Well, another example is that you do interviews and surveys, and the surveys can also be used for, can also be, the findings from surveys can also be used in an econometric research. And by doing interviews before you do a survey, you'd establish a familiarity with the topic that you're investigating. You also develop a sensitivity to how to talk about this issue, which is important for the survey questions, which should not use, abstract notions that people cannot relate to. I think that's I can be quite critical of econometrics, but I think survey econometrics really, in which all the relevant variables are included, I think is a very rich and valuable type of research. Well, and there's also, well, to study, either study or read on concrete cases of the phenomenon that you're investigating before you're doing a survey or regression analysis. Well, this is from a book. Now I have a number of slides and with a lot of text on it. So I'll probably have to be very selective. And the slides are about the strengths and weaknesses of both quantitative and qualitative research. And so you can read it for yourself either now or later. Well, the strengths of quantitative research, which is that it's very suited for testing hypotheses based on data, and the data are either collected or they are simply there and to be exploited. So with those data, you can establish correlations if you do econometrics, and you can also do quantitative predictions. So if you change the independent variables, the dependent variable also changes. So I think that's a unique property of that type of research. Another strength, which is perhaps less well known, is that it's relatively less time intensive. It's pushing a button. That's as a co-worker of mine once said. So you have the data in a database, and then you let a statistical program do all kinds of calculations, and it shows, and the results show up, on your screen, and as often within a minute. Also, it gives you all kinds of information. So it's relatively less time consuming. It also has a higher standing with many people in power, also within social science, although that higher standing, I don't know, it's not something I would apply to me. The weaknesses are that it tends to be superficial and tends to be confirm what the researchers always thought. So they're looking for whether variables which they think are important to include. They're using and they're looking for evidence that supports. So they're looking for the expected signs, and then they often say that it has the research has the finds that those variables are have the right sign, which is really odd, for a scientist to be saying something like that. The knowledge produced, tends not to pay a lot of attention to the specifics of local situations, context, and individuals. So that is as weaknesses. It's also less suited for theory building. Then we have qualitative research, where the data, are based on participants' own categories of meaning. It's a lot of attention can be given to the context, also people's ways of thinking, relevant institutions. So the descriptions can be rich, especially of the situated nature of the phenomenon that you're investigating. And all relevant variables can be included if you consider them. Some weaknesses are that it's less suited for testing hypotheses and theories, so it's more suited for refining propositions and offering situated case analysis. It takes more time to collect the data and also to process the data, and the results could be influences by the research personal biased, but I think that's true for any type of research. So all those, well, every method has its own limitations, and one of the strengths or advantages of mixed method research is that the weaknesses of one method can be overcome by using another method, which is a strong argument for using mixed method research. So you're able to also provide stronger evidence for a conclusion, richer, descriptions, and you can generate and test a grounded theory. There are also some limitations, and the first one is really important to mention. It's difficult for a single researcher to do all these different types of research because they're not educated for it. It's best done within a research team, in a project in which others bring in their own knowledge and skills, and from which you also learn something. So yeah, it's difficult to do for a single researcher. Also, the mixing is raises issue how to mix them properly. Although I've already given some examples, it's also not rocket science how to mix them. Often your common sense will get you a long way. It's more expensive and time consuming. Sometimes you even encounter criticism that you should not mix theories or even you really have to be a purist. It's really above me, really, why that would be an advantage. But it's sometimes in disciplinary journals, if you submit a multidisciplinary, people would indeed ask questions. Why do you use other concepts and methods from other disciplines? Well, this is a slide about about the three types of research. I'm just showing this. You can read for yourself. I don't want to go through it. Many things have already been said. I think the generalizability of quantitative research is greater, but qualitative research can be used for analytical generalizations, which are also important. And here, mixed method research is called pragmatic. Maybe a better word is abductive, that it combines deductive and inductive approach and in the development of propositions and explanations. Well, to give you a kind of feel for this type of research, I have some examples for you, and they are from two projects I was involved in. The first project was called Poll-Free, which was about resource efficiency, and the second one was Transit, which was about transformative social innovation. And in the Poll-Free project, where Poll-Free stands for Policy Options for a Resource Efficient Economy, we did survey analysis, interviews, focus groups, causal loop diagrams. We drew these, and we did some regression analysis. And the survey analysis was helped us to establish behaviors and the circumstances of behaviors in the areas of food, mobility, and home heating. In the interviews, we obtained information about life circumstances and people's own reflections about the food purchasing practices. So we wanted to understand it from the point of view of the people who we were interviewing. And okay, well, this is not, it's a bit of a jump. I thought there would be another slide, but the poll-free survey was done in 3 countries, the Netherlands, Austria, and Hungary. And this was a choice of convenience, but also, I think, also involved a fair degree of diversity. We studied 400 households, and we looked at practices, mindset, beliefs, and in the interviews we asked respondents also questions about how their practices shifted over time, and what we learned is that that in some countries, not the Netherlands, people are actually more focused on eating regional and seasonal food than people in the Netherlands, which is something I was quite surprised with myself. And we also found out that the tradition and cultural differences played quite an important way, and people would go to farmer markets and the like. So all of these, we also learned how different practices are being related to each other. Well, through the interviews, we're also able to compare elements of different types of food, regional, seasonal, processed, meat, fish, and organic, which could be plotted. We learned about motivations, whether these were, there was a great diversity in it, whether saving money played an important role, whether issues of convenience played a role. And because we had a survey analysis, we could also see how certain behaviors were related to personal household characteristics such as gender, age, education, income, and quite often the results were not really conclusive, so there was quite a diversity in terms of how this was related to a particular outcome. By using both interviews and a survey, I think we were able to obtain quite a deep understanding of the issue of behavior, social practices, and how this is related to relevant determinants.
Sorry, René, to interrupt you. There is 15 minutes to go.
Okay.
For the presentation.
Then I should really speed up. The second project is a project on transformative social innovation, which we were tasked to develop a theory of transformative social innovation, and I was involved in it, and others like Flora Avellino and Julia Wiedmeiner were involved in it, and they now are quite famous social innovation researchers owing to this project. So this was an EU Horizon project in which we did case studies, in which we also built a database of 50 critical turning points across 80 social innovation initiatives in Europe and Latin America. Well, we opted for the creation of a middle range theory with different building blocks. We paid attention to dynamics through what we call process theory, and we developed propositions. I'll go a little quicker now. So we had detailed case study research guidelines. We used theoretical integration workshops, and we had this large N database of critical turning points. Here's some pictures from the project I was in, which we I think you can see in this here you see an interaction with researchers and experts, and that's often we had a lot. The projects were really very interactive, and what we came up with ultimately is 4 building blocks of a TSI theory, where one based on relations in social innovation initiatives. So looking at the social relations and motivations and whether people are empowered or not. Then the relations in network formation, so how they are, how they are networked. And translocally, the discourse that gets formed and the alliances. The third building block was the relations to the institutional context, finding an institutional home and transposing logics. And fourthly, the relations to the social material context and about past dependency, re-emergence. So so about each we had 3 propositions, and that's what our theory consisted of. 12 propositions and some concepts. And we defined transformative social innovation as well, how did we define it? As agency that challenges and alters and replaces the dominant institutions. We learned that the word innovation didn't speak to the people practicing it, so that was quite a revealing finding. And we also learned that unusualness in the world of today is a better label, because quite often these social relations had existed before, and to different degrees and in various ways. They involved co-production, empowerment, disempowerment, co-determination, experimental learning, community activism, but also, not all of them were activist, open source issues, and many more things. One discovery we made was that these initiatives fitted with self-determination theory, which says that people have innate needs for autonomy, relatedness, and feelings of competence, which they can exercise as basic psychological needs. And we also found out that they're quite diverse, fitting with things that Andy Sterling had said about it. Speeding up this, what I like about sustainability transition studies is, I've already mentioned this, there is attention to agency structure and complex interaction effects, and it's multidisciplinary, and it has some weaknesses by being focused too much on single sectors, not paying attention to the diverse normative frames, and the landscape is not only slowly moving and not only exogenous, but also, endogenous, and can experience also fast dynamics. There's some more weaknesses. I won't dwell on that. So here are some pointers for transition research. Maybe that's useful to present. If you do, I've made a plea for multi-method research, but I also want to make a plea for for using multiple building blocks, such as the ones I just described. I think concepts have to be critically applied and reflected upon. I also have to, governance, a lot of study governance, but they're not, they see it more as an act of management rather than governance as the accommodation of interest. And you could include the mental models of those that you study in your analysis, which is what Giddens called the German hermeneutic. Examples of multi-method research are participatory system analysis with practitioners, or action research. You can also do QCA and structural equation. And I have a few slides up there, because you're not right. Because they're not well known and not so much practiced within transition studies. So I'll have a few slides about that. Starting with QCA. It seeks to determine, conditions of necessity and sufficiency in explaining something, and it's based on a set theoretical analysis based on Boolean logic. Here, it's being applied in a project on energy citizenship, in which we investigated conditions behind transformative impact, and then we came up with 6 conditions. being, having professionals and having a formal organization is one condition. Effective intermediation by not by government, but is a second one. And then there were, support by EU national and sub-national schemes also was included as in initiative-specific conditions. And we also paid attention to country-specific conditions to investigate outcomes. And, what we found we were able to establish, identify four configurations in which based on the interplay of those conditions. So it helps you to establish the aspects of causality through QCA, and I think it's with the help of truth tables. But again, like any method, it has its own limitations. So when the word truth is being used, it should not be taken literally. Now, having a background in econometrics, I only learned through a PhD student about a specific method called structural equation modeling for doing a multivariate data analysis, which allows you to investigate causal structures through a path analysis. And this, again, like QCA, something that can be done for relatively small samples, between 20 or 40 cases, and it does not require restrictive assumptions about statistical distributions. And in a project with a PhD student, in which we try to explain environmental policy, we use structural equation modeling, and it takes a while to explain this, but it has a measurement models for latent variables such as governance capacity, which is beyond simple measurement, and green advocacy, and also environmental policy is considered a latent variable for which manifest variable, something that can be measured, is being used. And what we were able to establish was also how the different variables interact with each other. So the influence of advocacy for environmental policy is both directly and via government capacity. I just don't want to go too deeply into this. It can be used for studying the fairness of energy transition policies, if you have a database or build one on that, or the share of community energy in different countries or counties. Another type of research which I think is worthwhile to do is to look at interaction effects, which are then is to do a study on blocking mechanisms and what's the other word? Unblocking mechanisms. Here, this approach is being applied to nature-inclusive agriculture, where it's being found that the farmers have actually, are constrained in many ways. So nature-inclusive agriculture really is not something that they can profitably do in the short time. So there are all kinds of things responsible for that, and they're being mapped here. So banks have difficulties assessing agroecological business models. They also may think that it has a high risk. It may require some resources which are not available. The weak position in the value chain it plays a role, same as short-term lease contracts, all of this, is creating or is blocking change, and so you need also, something else to escape this. Could be a transition fund, or the kind of things that are being studied in these development processes. Here's another one, which I'll skip that. I also want to mention social technical configuration analysis, which is based on a discourse network analysis. This is being pioneered by Jonas Heiberg and Bernard Truffer and Christian Wins. And it tries to track and measure configurations, the social and technical characteristics of those at the level of sectors, industries, and regions. And it's been applied to water management. And as I said, it's been based on a textual analysis. And issues of alignment then sort of are being portrayed for different configurations. There's a YouTube video about this, and there is also an STCA guidebook, which is being mentioned on this slide. So time has gone quickly, at least for me. So this is already the last slide of my presentation, which contains a statement by Noam Chomsky, famous linguistic scientist who also is an important commentator, who says that science is a bit like the joke about the drunk who is looking under his lamppost for a key that he has lost elsewhere, somewhere else in the street, but because there's no light, he only looks where there's light, because he has no other choice. And I think that's quite a profound and accurate statement. What we observe is not nature itself, but nature exposed to our method of questioning. That's a statement by a famous physicist, and I think I fully agree with that. So we should be critical about measurement and critical about our own assumptions and ways of thinking. And that's also reflected in the second or the third quote. It's a capital mistake to theorize before one has data, although, I think it's also important to theorize. And the last statement is in Dutch. I didn't know all the things I didn't know, which, it's so the gaps of knowledge are not apparent, are not immediately apparent. Which is why mixed method research is valuable. So here, and this is, the really last slide before the discussion. Here are some reading suggestions. Some of them are already included in the presentation. The book by Tromp on Wicked Philosophy of Science and Vision Development for Complex Problems is I think very insightful. There was also a book by what's his name, Andrew van de Ven, about engaged scholarship, which is worthwhile reading. So it's about doing research with practitioners, in which you build a theory, in which you carefully design research, and in which you also construct problems and search for solutions to that problem. That's really it. I feel I've talked for 50 minutes, but it was longer, and I hope it was not too long, and I hope I was able to explain the things I wanted to say relatively well. But here, this is where I stop. I'll also stop sharing, and I look forward to an interaction with you on the issue of mixed method research, and also research which makes use of different theories.